The paper was so small that High Arbiter Solon had to squint to read it. In his 400 years of service to the Galactic Council, he had received surrender documents spanning thousands of pages, he had processed tribute agreements that required entire data cores to store, but this response from the humans fit on a scrap no larger than his palm. One word, no. The assembly hall fell silent. 12 species watched as Solon's face shifted from confusion to disbelief to something that looked almost like fear. The Vethrani had ruled galactic trade for 8,000 years, no one refused them, no one even negotiated, species either paid tribute or ceased to exist. 3 weeks earlier, Solon had dispatched the formal demands to Earth. The terms were standard for a primitive spacefaring race: 60% of all mineral extraction, population controls, surrender of military vessels, a permanent garrison on every human world. The Council had absorbed hundreds of species this way. It was simply how civilization worked. The young Thelian courier named Riva stood frozen at the center of the chamber. She had carried this message across 3 star systems without looking at it. Diplomatic protocol forbade opening sealed responses. Now she wished she had prepared the Council for what they were about to read. "This is their complete response?" Solon asked. His voice echoed in the massive hall. "Yes, High Arbiter." Riva kept her eyes on the floor. "The human director handed me this paper personally. She thanked me for my service and offered me something called coffee. Then she sent me on my way." Murmurs rippled through the delegations. The crystalline Morvathi exchanged glances that sent light scattering across the walls. The insectoid Chelik clicked their mandibles in agitation. Even the usually silent Deepborn shifted in their water tanks. Ambassador Kathy of the Morvathi rose from her seat. Her body was ancient, over 2,000 years old, and her crystal structure had grown cloudy with age, but her mind remained sharp. "High Arbiter, I recommend caution. I have studied this species. They are not like the others we have absorbed. They are primitives." Solon dismissed her with a wave. 47 years in space, 14 colonies, 400 warships against our 50,000. What could possibly make them different? Their history, Kathy replied. They have spent their entire existence at war with themselves. They have developed weapons capable of rendering their own planet uninhabitable, and they have come close to using them multiple times. This is not a species that fears destruction. They have lived with it as a constant companion. Solon laughed. The sound was harsh and echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "You suggest we should fear a species that cannot even achieve peace among themselves. I suggest that a species willing to destroy itself is a species with nothing to lose." Kathy sat back down. "But I see my counsel is unwelcome." The debate continued for hours. The Vethrani faction demanded immediate military response. The Chelik worried about their trade routes through human space. The agricultural Fenrath wondered if humans might simply be reasoned with. But in the end, Solon's will prevailed. "We will send the first expeditionary fleet," he announced, 1,200 vessels under Admiral Vorath. "The humans will have one standard day to reconsider their response. If they maintain this foolish defiance, they will be pacified like every species before them." The assembly voted. The decision was nearly unanimous. Only the Morvathi abstained. Riva watched from her position near the door. She had met the humans. She had walked through their city called Geneva. She had seen their faces when they read the tribute demands. There had been no panic, no desperation, no frantic calculations of survival. The gray-haired director Adissa had read the document slowly, consulted with her colleagues for exactly 4 minutes, and then written that single word with a steady hand. That calm terrified Riva more than any fleet. As the assembly adjourned, she found herself standing beside Ambassador Kathy. "You think this is a mistake?" Riva said quietly. Kathy looked down at the young courier with something like pity. "I think this is the worst mistake the Council has ever made. We have grown comfortable. We have forgotten what it means to face a species that would rather die than submit." The humans remember. They have never forgotten. What will happen? The ancient Morvathi was silent for a long moment. "I do not know, but I suspect we are about to learn why the humans wrote only one word. They did not need more. That single word contained everything. Their history, their nature, their absolute refusal to bend. We asked them to kneel, young one. They answered with the only word that mattered." Riva looked back at the chamber where Solon was already coordinating fleet movements. In 3 days, the largest military force assembled in a century would arrive in human space. They expected surrender or slaughter. She wondered if anyone had considered a third possibility, that the humans had been waiting for this. that their single word was not defiance but invitation, that "no" was simply their way of saying, "come and try." Admiral Vorith had never seen a species broadcast music during a military standoff. His fleet hung at the edge of the Sol system, 1,200 warships arranged in perfect suppression formation. Before them, clustered near the red planet the humans called Mars, waited fewer than 300 enemy vessels. The numbers were almost insulting. This would not be a battle, it would be a demonstration. Yet the humans were playing music. His communications officer had identified it as something called classical orchestra. The piece was titled, Ride of the Valkyries. Vorith did not understand the significance, but something about the rising horns made his stomach tighten. "Admiral, the human vessels are holding position," his tactical officer reported. "They show no signs of retreat or surrender." "Then they are fools." Vorith settled into his command chair. "Signal all ships, standard advance. We will give them one final chance to submit before we begin." The fleet moved forward, 50,000 crew members across 1,200 vessels, representing the combined might of the Galactic Council. Vorith had commanded suppression campaigns before, he had broken rebellions on a dozen worlds. This would be no different. His ship crossed the orbit of the outer gas giant. Nothing happened. They passed the ringed planet the humans had named after an old god. Still nothing. Vorith allowed himself a thin smile. The humans were paralyzed with fear. Their tiny fleet could not decide whether to fight or flee. By the time they chose, it would be too late. The fleet entered the asteroid belt. The first explosion tore through his port flank without warning. "Contact," his tactical officer screamed. "Multiple contacts. They are coming from the asteroids themselves." Vorith watched in disbelief as rocks he had dismissed as debris ignited engines and became weapons. Mining stations that had registered as civilian infrastructure opened hidden panels and launched missiles. The entire belt had been transformed into a killing field. "Impossible," he breathed. "This infrastructure has been here for decades. They could not have known we would come." "Admiral," his intelligence officer spoke, her voice shaking. "I am reviewing human history. They have a concept called preparation for the worst case. They build bomb shelters in times of peace. They stockpile food against famines that never come. They plan for disasters that may never happen. They prepared for us before we ever threatened them." The realization struck Vorith like a physical blow. The Council had watched humanity expand for 47 years. They had seen the colonies, the mining operations, the shipyards. They had dismissed it all as primitive industry. They had never considered that every single installation might serve a second purpose. His fleet was dying. Ships exploded around him as weapons emerged from hiding places throughout the system. Human vessels that had seemed to wait passively near Mars now surged forward with acceleration that should have killed their crews. They moved like predators, exploiting every gap in his formation. "Admiral, the human ships, their pilots are sustaining forces that would crush our crews," his medical officer reported. "How is this possible? Their homeworld." Vorith remembered the briefing files. "Earth has gravity nearly twice what most council species evolved under. Their bodies are built to survive punishment we cannot imagine." A human destroyer, its hull, already burning from multiple hits, did not retreat. Instead, it accelerated directly toward one of Vorith's cruisers. The collision destroyed both vessels. "They sacrificed themselves," his tactical officer whispered. "They chose death over retreat." Vorith understood then what Ambassador Kathy had tried to warn the Council about. These were not soldiers fighting for territory or resources. These were creatures defending their home with the absolute conviction that death was preferable to submission. The Council had forgotten what that looked like. The humans had never known anything else. "All ships, retreat," Vorith ordered. "Fall back to the system boundary." The withdrawal was chaos. Human vessels pursued them relentlessly, striking at damaged ships, finishing off stragglers. For 3 days, Vorith's fleet ran while the humans hunted. When he finally reached safe space, he counted his losses. 400 ships remained, 800 had been destroyed, captured, or abandoned. The Council had not suffered such casualties in over a century, and the humans had not pursued beyond their own borders. Vorith recorded his report with shaking hands. He included combat footage that showed human pilots laughing as they executed maneuvers that would kill any other species. He documented the moment a boarded human vessel detonated its own reactor rather than be captured. He described the music that had played throughout the battle, different songs for different phases, as if the humans had choreographed their violence. His final words were a warning. The Council believed we were sending a message to humanity. We were wrong. Humanity sent a message to us. They said no, and they meant it. If we continue this war, we will not be fighting soldiers. We will be fighting a species that has spent its entire existence preparing to die rather than surrender. I do not know how to defeat an enemy like that. I am not certain anyone does. He transmitted the report and waited. Somewhere behind him, in the Sol system they had failed to conquer, the humans had stopped their music. The silence was somehow worse. The Grand Armada stretched across 3 light-minutes of space, and still High Arbiter Solon could not see its end. 50,000 warships, every species had contributed, the Vethrani had emptied their reserve fleets, the Chelik had recalled merchant escorts from across the galaxy, even the pacifist Fenrath had sent medical vessels to support what would surely be the final campaign. This was not a punitive expedition. This was extinction. Solon stood on the observation deck of his flagship. Watching the assembled might of galactic civilization, behind him, Admiral Vorith waited in disgrace. His defeat had cost him his command, but Solon had insisted he witness what proper leadership could accomplish. Today we correct your failure, Solon said without turning. Today humanity learns that no species defies the Council and survives. High Arbiter, Vorith spoke carefully. I urge you to reconsider. What I witnessed in their system, these are not rational beings, they will not surrender even when facing annihilation, then they will be annihilated. Solon smiled, history will forget them within a generation. The fleet began its jump sequence, 50,000 vessels synchronized their drives, the fabric of space bent around them, they emerged at the boundary of human space, a single ship waited for them. Solon laughed, 1 vessel, they send 1 vessel against 50,000. Their arrogance is almost admirable. The human ship broadcast on all frequencies, the voice that filled the armada belonged to Director Adissa, warships of the Galactic Council. This is Director Adissa of the United Earth Government. Before you proceed, there is something you must understand. Please receive the following transmission. Data flooded into every ship simultaneously. Star charts, coordinates, sensor readings. Solon watched as his tactical display updated with new information. His blood went cold. What is this? He demanded. The data showed weapons platforms, hundreds of them, positioned in deep space near the homeworld of every Council species. Each platform carried devices the humans called Nova bombs, planet killers, weapons designed to ignite the atmosphere of any world they struck. These platforms have been in position for 11 years, Director Adissa continued. Since before we made first contact with your Council, we hoped we would never need them. We prepared them anyway. This is who we are. We plan for the worst, we build for survival, we do not trust the universe to be kind. Solon's hands trembled. This is a bluff. They could not have deployed such weapons without our detection. High Arbiter, his sensor officer spoke. The coordinates check out. We are detecting the platforms. They are real. Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Director Adissa spoke again. If your armada crosses into human space, every platform activates. Your worlds burn, ours burn. Everyone burns. This is the choice you face. You can have your war, and we can all die together, or you can turn around, and we can try something different. The communication channel fell silent. Chaos erupted across the fleet. The Chelik delegation demanded immediate withdrawal. The Morvathi had already begun powering down their weapons. The Fenrath were broadcasting prayers. Only the Vethrani held firm, but even their captains exchanged uncertain glances. We will not be threatened. Solon shouted, all ships, advance. They are bluffing. No one moved. I gave an order. Admiral Vorith stepped forward. With respect, High Arbiter, you gave an order to commit suicide. No captain in this fleet will follow it. The humans have made their position clear. If we attack, everyone dies. If we withdraw, only our pride suffers. This is treason. This is survival. Vorith gestured at the display. Look at those platforms. They were deployed before we ever threatened humanity. These people built doomsday weapons while they were still exploring their own system. They pointed them at worlds they had never visited, species they had never met, not because they wanted to use them, but because they understood that someday, someone like us would come. They have been preparing for this moment their entire existence. Solon looked at the single human ship floating before his armada, 1 vessel against 50,000, and that 1 vessel held more power than all of them combined. Not because of its weapons, but because of what its people were willing to do. What do they want? He asked finally. Speak with them. Vorith replied, ask them. They wrote a single word because they wanted us to understand them. We did not listen. Perhaps it is time we started. The Grand Armada held position, no weapons fired, no ships advanced. Somewhere in the command structure, someone made a decision. The fleet began to withdraw. Director Adissa watched them go. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced. The platforms were real, the weapons were real, but she had not known if she could have given the order. She hoped she would never have to find out. The humans had won their second victory, not through battle, but through the simple truth that they were willing to end everything rather than live on their knees. It was not a comforting victory, but it was enough. The humans arrived at Station Meridian carrying gifts, and the Galactic Council did not know how to respond. Ambassador Kathy watched from the observation gallery as the human delegation walked through corridors designed to intimidate. The ceilings soared impossibly high, gravity shifted between sections to disorient visitors, holographic displays showed the military might of 12 species. Every element of the station had been crafted to make newcomers feel small. Director Adissa walked through it all as if she were strolling through a garden. Her delegation carried boxes. The council's security teams had scanned them obsessively. They contained no weapons, no surveillance devices, no hidden technology, just strange organic substances the humans called chocolate and coffee, along with data storage units filled with something called music. They bring us treats, High Arbiter Solon muttered. He had survived his removal from power, but barely. The new leadership had kept him on as an advisor, mostly to remind everyone what failure looked like, as if we are children to be appeased. They bring us their culture, Kathy corrected. This is how humans make peace. They share what they love. The negotiations lasted 17 days. The humans asked for surprisingly little: recognition as equals, fair trade agreements, a seat on the council, the right to expand within designated regions without interference. No tribute, no oversight, no garrisons. In return, they offered something unprecedented: medical technology. Director Adissa spread data files across the conference table. Our species has spent centuries fighting diseases that would kill us in days. We have developed treatments for conditions your best physicians have never encountered. This compound here, it eliminates the crystalline decay that claims elderly Morvathi. This one stabilizes the genetic drift that plagues Chelik hive queens. We have cures for problems you thought were simply part of existence. The council representative stared at the data in disbelief. You would share this freely? The Chelik delegate asked. We would share this as partners. Not as tribute, not as payment, as the foundation of actual cooperation. Your council has spent 8,000 years demanding submission. We are offering something different. We are offering friendship. Ambassador Kathy felt something she had not experienced in centuries: hope. The vote was not unanimous. The Vethrani faction abstained, their pride still wounded, but the majority accepted humanity's terms. For the first time in galactic history, a species had joined the council without conquest or submission. After the formal ceremonies, Kathy found Director Adissa alone on an observation deck. The human woman stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the stars. You seem troubled for someone who just achieved victory, Kathy said. Adissa did not turn. I am thinking about what victory cost, and what it nearly cost: the platforms. The Nova bombs. We built them in secret, thousands of workers, decades of preparation, all so we could threaten to end everything. I gave the order to deploy them when I was 32 years old. I have lived with that decision for 20 years. Kathy moved to stand beside her. Would you have used them, if the Armada had not stopped? Adissa was silent for a long moment. I do not know. That is the honest answer. I built my entire strategy on the assumption that no one would call our bluff, but if they had, if Solon had ordered the attack anyway. She shook her head. I tell myself I would have given the order. I tell myself that death for everyone was preferable to slavery for humanity, but I am grateful I never had to find out if that was true. You gambled the existence of every species in the galaxy. Yes, Adissa finally turned to face the ancient Morvathi, and I would do it again. Because the alternative was to teach the galaxy that humanity could be broken. If we had submitted, your council would have absorbed us like every other species. Our culture would have been diluted, our independence erased, our children raised to serve. Some things are worth risking everything to prevent. Kathy considered this. Your species is very young. You have existed for such a brief time compared to the rest of us. Yet you carry such weight. We carry our history, Adissa replied. Every war, every genocide, Every moment we came close to destroying ourselves, we remember it all, not to celebrate it, but to understand what we are capable of. Your council forgot what it means to face an enemy with nothing to lose. We never had the luxury of forgetting, and now, what happens now that you have won your place among us? Director Adissa smiled. It was the first genuine warmth Kathy had seen from her. Now we try something harder than war. We try to build something. Friendships, trade, shared knowledge. We try to prove that our no was not just defiance, it was an invitation to treat us as equals. She reached into her coat and produced a small container. This is coffee. It is bitter and it will probably keep you awake for days given your metabolism, but humans share it with people they want to know better. Would you like to try? Kathy accepted the container. The liquid inside was dark and steaming. Its smell was sharp and unfamiliar. She drank. It was terrible, but she understood the gesture. To partnership, Kathy said. Adissa nodded. To partnership, and to never needing those platforms again. Riva had carried the paper for 15 years, and today she finally understood why. The Hall of First Contact on Station Meridian had been transformed, where once the architecture had been designed to intimidate, now it welcomed. The gravity remained constant throughout, the ceilings had been lowered to comfortable heights, and at the center of the main gallery, in a case made of Morvathi crystal, hung a small piece of paper bearing a single word, no. Riva stood before the display, remembering the day she had delivered that message. She had been young then, a junior courier terrified of the mighty council. Now she served as senior diplomatic liaison between humanity and the Thelian people. Her species had flourished under the new trade agreements humans had negotiated. You were there, were you not? She turned to find a young human standing beside her. He wore the formal robes of a council delegate, but he carried himself with the casual confidence that seemed bred into his species. I was, Riva replied. I carried that paper from Earth to this station. I watched High Arbiter Solon unfold it. I saw his face when he read it. My name is Obi. The young man extended his hand. Riva had learned this human custom. She shook it. Director Adissa was my grandmother. She passed away 3 years ago, but she spoke of you. She said you were kind to her when the galaxy was not. She offered me coffee. Riva smiled at the memory. It was the first time anyone from a major power had treated me as something other than a servant. They stood in silence, watching visitors pass through the gallery. There were Chelik younglings on educational tours, Morvathi elders seeking historical context, Bethrani officers studying what had once been their greatest defeat, and everywhere, humans, laughing, teaching, learning, building relationships one conversation at a time. Your grandmother changed everything, Riva said. Not just for humanity, but for all of us. The council is different now. We negotiate instead of demand, we invite instead of conquer. She would say the council changed itself. Obi replied. She always believed that her no was really an offer. She was saying no to submission, but yes to something better. Most people only heard the refusal. They missed the invitation underneath. Did she ever regret the platforms, the weapons she built? Obi was quiet for a moment. She dismantled them herself, every single one. It took her 8 years after the peace was signed. She said they were necessary once, but keeping them would mean she never truly believed peace was possible. She chose to trust the galaxy, even knowing the galaxy might betray that trust. That seems very human. It is. We are strange creatures. We prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. We build weapons and then pray we never use them. We say no to chains but yes to friendship. My grandmother understood that about us. She knew that humanity's greatest strength was not our willingness to fight, but our ability to stop fighting when fighting was no longer necessary. A chime echoed through the gallery. Obi checked his communication device and smiled. I have a council session to attend. There is a new species on the rim, the Vorath Collective. They have expanded without permission into territory the Bethrani claim. The old council would have sent a fleet to demand tribute, and the new council. We are sending an invitation, a request to talk, to understand, to perhaps find common ground. It may not work. They may refuse, they may even attack, but we will try words before weapons. That is the legacy my grandmother left us. He nodded respectfully and walked away, leaving Riva alone with the paper. She thought about the 15 years since that single word had shaken the galaxy. Humanity had brought medicines that saved billions of lives. Their music played in corridors across 1,000 stations. Their food had created entirely new trade networks. Their Stubborn insistence on treating every species as equals had slowly reshaped how the Council functioned, but more than any of that, they had taught the galaxy something it had forgotten, that no did not have to mean war, that strength did not require domination, that the bravest thing a species could do was refuse to submit and then offer friendship to those who had tried to break them. Riva reached out and touched the crystal case. Beneath the paper, a small plaque had been added. It read, "The word that changed the galaxy," not because it was defiant, but because it was honest. She understood now why Director Adissa had written only that single word. More words would have been negotiation, they would have been weakness, they would have invited compromise. But no was complete. It contained everything humanity was, their history, their pride, their absolute refusal to bend, and within that refusal, hidden but present, was the promise that if the galaxy ever learned to respect them, they would be the most loyal friends any species could ask for. The paper was yellowing now, the ink fading, but the word remained clear, and somewhere in the galaxy, a young species called the Vorith Collective was receiving an invitation instead of an ultimatum, because one human, decades ago, had written one word and changed everything. Riva smiled and walked away. The future, she decided, was worth believing in.